Yeah, that is some real deal video there captured of it right in the thick of it with Ida. And now we're joined on the phone right now. Aaron Rigsby, first off, this is incredible stuff, man.
Yeah, that was some of the, it was a really unique experience. You know, realistically, there's a 50-50 shot if a hurricane makes landfall during the day or night, but it always seems to be on the night side of that. To experience a major hurricane during the day, it really turned up that experience level that I'm kind of used to by now with all these major hurricanes.
Oh, absolutely. So let's break it all down here. When, of course, we all know with hurricanes, you have a better lead time, but you just don't know, of course, where it is going to be. There's different situations where it could be in a particular spot. It could change. How did you zero in on this to be right in the eye of it?
Yeah, so there was actually, for once, really remarkable agreement on the computer models that we all look at to forecast these hurricanes and where they're eventually going to go. Originally, when it was still an open wave, before it was even a tropical depression or anything, it looked like it was going to maybe drift a little closer to the Texas area. And then as it got its center formed and went over the warm waters of the ocean and became a tropical depression, the models were able to lock on to its center. And when we saw that happen, we started to notice that eastern trend, unfortunately, into Louisiana. And leading up to that, you know, my heart couldn't help but sink because of what those poor people had dealt with in 2020 with 3 separate hurricanes, 2 of them being majors. And it just seemed like a really messed up film to be talking about another hurricane, let alone one on this caliber, potentially even stronger than Laura, heading for those same areas affected by the last one.
Absolutely, absolutely. And can you tell our viewers here, with this footage that you were able to grab? I mean, first off, what's it like being part of this with winds that are topping up over 100 miles per hour? First off, how are you able to still get steady shots?
Yeah, so the steady shots thing is kind of a challenge because sometimes I'll ride these out in parking garages, which is my preferred go-to method for safety reasons. But in Louisiana, those are really hard to come by. It's a lot of marshland, a lot of bayou, and a lot of places that are below or above sea level. But with my vehicle that I have, I designed these window guards specifically for situations such as hurricane and hail. So in this one, I rode it out in my vehicle because I like to stay as mobile as long as possible. So the car is kind of like shaking back and forth, and it's kind of hard to keep a steady shot sometimes. So I kind of prop it up against the window or angle it myself to where I'm not getting rocked so much. But typically in a parking garage, I can keep it on a tripod with it being somewhat stable. And then the other thing, too, is it's kind of hard to focus on your view camera because the whole time, especially when you're riding these out in your vehicle, you have to be constantly looking 360 degrees around you to make sure no debris is coming loose and that could potentially hit your car and damage things other than wind and potentially injure you.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine. Now, do you have in your vehicle, do you have anybody else that is spotting for you just the amount of debris?
No, I actually chase solo through most of these hurricanes. Sometimes when I'm in a parking garage, a few other chasers or media personnel will get wind of it and be riding it out there. But for the most part, I'm kind of on my own when it comes to that. And you kind of learn to adapt to the environment around you and just keep checking 360 degrees and hope that you can see everything around you and hope luck is on your side that nothing hits your car.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just talk about also, I mean, I can't even imagine what the rush, though, of being right in the thick of it. What is the rush like for, I mean, you've seen, so days before, I mean, you're looking at all the models, you're seeing this massive storm build up, and now it's go time, now it's show time. What is it like to be right there in the middle of it?
Words can't accurately put into perspective just what you're dealing with, especially when you're trying to post a video. But it's a wide variety of emotions. It's actually very, very stressful, especially chasing these things in Louisiana close to the bayou due to limited areas to take cover in. Originally, I was targeting somewhere a little closer to the coast to intercept this because at the coast is where your strongest winds are going to be. Because no matter what, even if it's only 10 miles further inland, the hurricane will be on a weakening trend due to friction. It needs water to survive. And I was originally as close to the coast as I could possibly be, right up against the levees where they had closed everything down. But when, Ida started going under its rapid intensification, we were expecting rapid intensification from the get-go, but I didn't personally think that it was going to get to the caliber that it was, especially since it took longer than what was originally anticipated to get organized. And when it started dropping 10 millibars, what seemed like every hour, and the winds kept going from 130 at landfall to 140 at landfall to 150 at landfall with gusts up to 190 miles an hour. I mean, we're talking winds that are almost equivalent to an EF4 tornado. And it went from feeling confident in my spot that I was at to stressing very hard to whether it was going to be safe to ride it out there. And then you have to your whole plan goes out the entire window, and you have to come up with something on the fly. So I actually retreated a little further inland and still intercepted the eye from a safer location in retrospect, just in case that surge topped those levees. I didn't want it to come to that, but with a storm in that caliber, it's a chance that I wasn't willing to take. And experience told me if my gut doesn't sit right, then I should probably move.
Right, and you just never know what could happen. Now, explain for our viewers here, what is it like then when you are in the eye of it?
So the best way I can describe it is it's the most peaceful yet terrifying thing that you can pretty much see in your life. This one in particular, well, the one, especially one, I got into the eye of Hurricane Harvey a few years ago, and when I walked out into the eye of that one, I looked up and I could see stars in the Milky Way inside with lightning illuminating the stadium effect of the hurricane, where you can see, like you see on the Hurricane Hunters, the 360-degree view of the eye wall. And in Hurricane Ida, it wasn't necessarily the stadium effect. I got little peaks of it, but it went from such vicious, violent winds to buildings flying to pieces beside me, 30-mile-an-hour winds and 140 gusts to just, it looked like a rainy Midwestern day. There was a very light breeze, and then it kind of went to a dead calm, and you could hear birds chirping, and you could even hear some crickets off in the distance. And then when you get to the other side of the hurricane eye wall, the winds change directions, and then you go from dead calm, and there's no in between. It literally goes from 0-mile-an-hour winds to just getting blasted by 90-mile-an-hour winds again. And you have to, especially when you're mobile, you have to reposition your vehicle and find a spot to ride out the hurricane with the winds blowing in a separate direction. So again, you don't get hit by debris that you didn't see previously. But it's almost like a meditating experience.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that one. And what was the length of that you were in the eye? So how long did that go until you heard and you saw the other forceful winds coming through?
I would say it wasn't too long. It was about 15, 20 minutes. It was a little longer than probably it should have been because it started to slow down a little bit as it came on land, and actually eventually almost stalled to my north, and we got hit with the back end of the eye wall and rain longer than we did with the first portion of the hurricane where the most fierce winds were. But you take already damaged buildings, even if winds are only 90 to 100 miles an hour, you're damaging buildings already damaged, and buildings that didn't fall apart during the first one they were already compromised, so then they were falling apart in the second eye wall, let alone with all those winds being even longer this time. Right.
Now, so you're in the vehicle now. Is your vehicle just, absolutely rocking, or is it pretty stable for as much as it can be?
It's as stable for as much as it can be. I'm in a Forester, so it's a little bit higher off of the ground. But however, you can angle yourself to where you're kind of facing in the wind. So you kind of just rock back and forth. What you don't want to do is you don't want to be caught parked sideways when one of those big gusts comes, because that's how you end up getting top heavy and potentially flip over your vehicle, and you wouldn't even know what happened. Because it's crazy when you're in the inner eye wall of a hurricane. It's almost like a freight train coming through the trees. You can hear the gust that's about to hit you before it actually hits you. It creeps up on you and then just blasts you. So you would have maybe 2 seconds to know that a big wind gust is coming, and you wouldn't even have time to put your car in drive to reposition before it hit you.
Oh my gosh! So what are some other things that you saw? We're seeing just like that gas station just being pummeled and so much other stuff. But what are some other things that you saw? You're just like, oh wow, this is it.
Well, actually, so one thing in particular that I noticed before I talk about the actual experience was the amount of people that seems to be leaving at the very last second. The morning of, when we originally got to our spot, we were wondering why the heck there was so much traffic out. And I think more people had stayed behind when it was originally supposed to be 130-mile-an-hour hurricane. And then when the news came on that morning and the hurricane hunters were going through, and we're talking about 150, 155, people were making, last-minute dashes out of there, just leaving everything behind and getting the heck out of there. So that was kind of a shock to me. And out of a dozen hurricanes, I hadn't seen that much traffic before about 4 hours prior to landfall. And then when things so there was these little moats, there were these little dry areas in the hurricane right before we got to the inner eye wall. And you could always tell before when we were getting ready to get into those highest winds associated closest to the eye, because there was no rain and you would be getting these periodic gusts to 90 to 100 miles an hour. And then it came in almost like a bowling ball. You could hear it coming, like I was talking about earlier, and then it just hit and it just stays there for so long because that's where your fastest sustained winds are. And the warehouse that I was actually parked beside, or at least I'm pretty sure it was a warehouse or some kind of storage facility. When that first window went, all bets were off from there, and I was just like, oh boy, I've been in this position before. And that whole thing got gutted, huge pieces falling out, insulations flying everywhere. Gas canopies started coming off, and it happened so quickly. It's almost hard to. It happens so quickly and goes away so quickly. You barely have time to process what the heck just happened.
Oh, I know. I can't even. Yeah, I mean, just thinking about it and seeing it, and then you're onto something else, and you're trying to capture another moment here. So when the storm has passed you, then, and you are done documenting everything that you possibly can get, and you're just happy to one, be alive, and to two, that your vehicle is still okay and operable. I mean, can you explain a little bit then what do you start doing as far as the business end of a storm chaser and getting this video to outlets that want it?
Yeah, so pretty much I have a whole process, and I practice this in the off season because I want to be able to get this stuff up as quickly as possible, especially before cell towers go down. The biggest thing I tell people that I like to do is I want to get this video out as quickly as possible because people need to know what's going on. They have loved ones here. They have loved ones in these places. They have properties in these places, and everyone is so stressed out because they don't know. They don't know how bad the damage is. That for all they know, it could have been less bad than what it was forecast to be, or it could have been worse. And if I can provide that information to them while they're watching the news and give them some sort of comfort or, give them some kind of details about the area where they can try and get a hold of loved ones, then I feel like I'm doing my job properly. And after these hurricanes, I like to stay for days after if possible. And there's a common misconception that we just go around taking pictures of damage and get some kind of joy out of that. And we don't at all. This is a story that needs told. And a lot of times, especially these smaller towns that just get absolutely obliterated, it's easy to get lost in old news and people just forget that there's people still suffering down there. And if I can stay down there longer and keep, interviewing people, getting their story, posting these videos and pictures of the damage, it can provide extra help. There's groups and foundations that want to donate food and water, and by showing these pictures and videos to these communities that have been hit hardest that aren't a major metropolitan area, they can get the help that they need a lot sooner than later.
I'm so glad you talked about that, Aaron, because even coming from the media side, we talk about the buildup. We're talking about the track that, and we show everything that is about to happen with this hurricane. And then obviously on the day of, they are in full, hurricane mode. The day after, it's all about the aftermath and the cleanup. And then it's very rare, maybe even 2 to 3 days later, that they're still talking about it. And I mean, it gets lost, but I'm glad you brought it up because those communities, especially the smaller ones, I mean, it is going to be taking them months and months, even maybe years to recuperate.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I couldn't believe it's a weird perspective. So when I was down earlier this year for Tropical Storm Fred, I went through Mexico Beach, which was heavily hit by Hurricane Michael. And I couldn't believe how well they had built back in just a 3-year time span. But then I started thinking about it, and man, it's already been 3 years since Hurricane Michael, and I didn't hear, anything about the recovery effort and how they were doing. I maybe saw an article or two here and there, but it's just easy to kind of bury these things behind us and forget either how far people have come or that there's people still down there suffering. And there's always this weird perspective after I leave these areas because you want to help everybody, but you just can't. And you almost have a sense of guilt when I get to go back to my normal home, live my regular life while you just saw people's turned upside down forever. And it's something that never gets easier as a chaser, no matter how long you do this.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And then lastly, Aaron, what's next? What are you going to be tracking next? What do you see coming up on the horizon?
Fortunately for everyone, things should look to slow down a little bit. That's not to say that something couldn't develop sooner rather than later, but honestly, for my own sake and for everyone's sake, to help recover and get this tropical season behind us, I hope things slow down a little bit. I was just up in Rhode Island for the last tropical storm for Henri, and then before that, I was in Florida. These things have been having me run all over the country, so I'm ready to rest, relax a little bit, and get caught up on some much-needed sleep. And I really hope that I don't have to go to Louisiana again anytime soon, because, you know, I've spent so much time there over the last year and a half, and I've made so many friends down there, it almost feels like home to me. And it crushes me when I see these tropical systems take aim at that part of the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you deserve some rest. We're glad that you are definitely okay, and you once again just captured some incredible video, really just showcasing the power that Mother Nature really does have. Aaron Rigsby, storm chaser, thank you so much for calling in and really sharing your story and what you saw, and of course the video that you captured. It's truly amazing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure being on here.
Yeah, no problem, Aaron. And thank you so much. And you have a good night. And we'll continue right here on Live Now from Fox. We'll play out right now just some of the sights and sounds of this storm.